Hold on, what? Those were the last words Dru Sjodin's boyfriend heard. 1 second, she was chatting about weekend plans, the next, silence. A young woman, alone in a cold, wind-bitten parking lot, and then nothing. It was a crisp November evening in 2003. Dru, a 22-year-old college student bursting with life and plans, had just clocked out from her part-time shift at a trendy clothing store in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Thanksgiving was around the corner, and like most students, Dru was juggling everything: school, work, relationships, and dreams that seemed just within reach. She dialed her boyfriend, Chris, as she walked to her car parked outside Columbia Mall. They spoke for a few easy, comfortable minutes. Then came the shift, the thing that still echoes in every retelling. "Oh my God, okay." Click. The line went dead. At first, Chris thought maybe her phone had died or the call had dropped. It was 2003 after all. But 3 hours later, his phone rang again. Dru's number lit up the screen. Heart racing, Chris answered. Silence. Just the distant rush of wind, like someone driving fast with the window cracked. And faint beeps, like buttons being pressed. "Dru? Dru, can you hear me?" Nothing. He kept calling back. No answer. Panic crept in. By the time Dru's roommate got the call, worry had turned into dread. Dru was supposed to head straight from the mall to her second job waiting tables at the ground round, but she never showed. She never called in sick. She never just disappeared. The roommate, heart-pounding, tried hospitals. Nothing. It was late by now, the November chill setting in outside. Should they call the police? They did, but the response was as chilling as the cold. She's 22, probably went somewhere on her own. Give it time. But time is the one thing a missing person doesn't have. Before sunrise, her roommate took a step that would shift the case. She called campus police. Unlike city police, they listened. And soon, a search began that would shock the nation. Before we continue, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because what you're about to hear next is a case that rattled investigators, changed federal law, and left a scar on everyone who knew Dru. Let's keep going. Picture this. A young woman, always smiling, never slowing down. And then she's gone. Dru Katrina Sjodin, born September 26, 1981, in the tiny town of Pequot Lakes, Minnesota. To everyone who knew her, she was energy itself. Cheerful, stubborn, the kind of person who'd organize a fundraiser, paint a mural, and play 3 sports all in the same week. She was an artist, a basketball player, a volunteer at women's shelters and charity runs. In high school, they crowned her prom queen, but she wore the title lightly, the way she wore everything. Because Dru wasn't just popular, she was beloved. Her laugh could fill a room. And she had plans, big ones. She dreamed of seeing Australia, of designing greeting cards, of living in a city big enough to get lost in, school backpack college life, double shifts, and a bright horizon. By 22, Dru was living the student hustle at the University of North Dakota, majoring in fine arts, studying hard, working 2 jobs, a retail clerk at Victoria's Secret and a waitress at the ground round, still finding time to paint, to volunteer, to call her family nearly every day. She'd been dating Chris Lang, a guy who adored her. They'd started making quiet plans, maybe an apartment, maybe more. It was the kind of hopeful, messy, beautiful life every student knows. That semester, she joined a university travel program. Australia was next on the list, just weeks away. Hot beverage, November 22nd, 2003, a day like any other. It was a Saturday. A cold wind scoured the plains outside Grand Forks, but inside Columbia Mall, Christmas music played over tinny speakers. Dru worked her usual afternoon shift. She helped customers pick out gifts, folded clothes with practice speed. She was in a good mood, chatting, laughing. After work, she bought herself a new purse. A small thing, but she liked it. She left the store around 5 p.m., planning to drive across town to her second job. But before she got to her car, she called Chris. For minutes. Just enough time for small talk, weekend plans, a quiet "I love you." And then, "Oh my God, okay?" Silence. Chris tried to call back. Nothing. but he brushed it off at first. Maybe her phone died. Maybe she dropped it. 3 hours later, Dru's number flashed on his screen. Hope surged, but all he heard was wind. Button beeps. No voice. Dru, are you there? Nothing. That's the moment worry turned to terror. Police scarlight the first night. Worry becomes fear. Chris called Dru's roommate. She hadn't seen Dru all day. They both waited, hoping Dru would walk through the door. But then came a call from the ground round. Dru never showed up for her shift. Dru, the girl who never missed work, never forgot a call. Her roommate tried hospitals. Nothing. Finally, she called the Grand Forks police. The answer was cold. She's an adult. Give it time. Maybe she ran off. But anyone who knew Dru knew that was impossible. She wasn't the type to run away, especially without telling her family, her boyfriend, her best friends. Woman police officer campus police take action. Around midnight, desperate, Dru's roommate reached out to the university police department. And this time, someone listened. Officers drove to Columbia Mall. In the empty, echoing parking lot, they found Dru's car still parked. Inside, her coat, shopping bags, phone charger. The doors were unlocked. No broken glass. No signs of a struggle. Just emptiness. And on the ground, near the car, a small black knife sheath. A single clue, but it was enough. University police called Grand Forks police back. Now, finally it was clear Dru hadn't run away. Something terrible had happened. Movie camera, the desperate hunt for answers. Investigators scrambled to pull CCTV footage from them all. But Dru's car had been parked in the one blind spot in the lot, out of view of the cameras. Inside, they pored over hours of footage. They saw Dru shopping after her shift, laughing with a store clerk, carrying her new purse. She looked relaxed, unhurried, like someone thinking about Christmas gifts, not danger. But what happened next? That's what investigators had to find out. Fast. Mobile phone, a phone call from nowhere. Police pulled Dru's phone records, and something chilling surfaced. Her last call, the one with Chris, didn't ping from the mall. Instead, it pinged a tower near Crookston, Minnesota, a small town about 30 minutes away. Impossible. Her car was still at the mall. She couldn't have driven herself, which meant only one thing. Dru had been taken. Motorway, the search expands. Word spread through campus. Hundreds of students volunteered to search. They combed wooded trails, riverbanks, and fields, braving the bitter cold, calling Dru's name into empty wind. Time was slipping away, and every hour made it less likely they'd find her alive. But hope, that stubborn, flickering hope, kept them moving. A face in the crowd. Then a break. Among endless CCTV clips, investigators noticed a man, middle-aged, wearing black, walking with a limp and a cane. He entered the mall multiple times, bought nothing, stared at women, followed them. They traced his path, watching, waiting, and at one moment, when a young woman passed by who looked like Dru, he stood up and followed her. Detectives ran the grainy footage through every database they had. They found a possible match. Alfonso Rodriguez Jr., a convicted sex offender, a man recently out of prison, living in Crookston, the very place Dru's phone had last pinged. And this, right here, is where the investigation flipped from a missing person search to something far darker. Before we move on, hit the like button if you want justice stories told and shared. Subscribe and stay with us, because what came next would shock the entire country. Imagine staring at hours of grainy footage, then seeing one man who doesn't belong, watching, waiting, and suddenly, this is him. The suspect emerges. As detectives traced Dru's final steps, that single figure kept showing up. Middle-aged, limping, leaning on a cane, walking in and out of the grocery store, the corridors, the benches, never buying anything, eyes always scanning. In one frame, he stood. In the next, he walked behind a young woman. Not Dru, but someone who looked like her. To investigators, it felt like watching a spider wait for the perfect moment. The list of names. They ran the footage against criminal databases. They didn't start from scratch. They started with predators, men with violent pasts, Men who had hurt women before. From dozens of names, they narrowed it to 4. And then, finally one, Alfonso Rodriguez Jr. Rodriguez matched the limp, the age, the cane, and, chillingly, the criminal past. A history of violence. Rodriguez's record wasn't just long. It was terrifying. At 21, he tried to sexually assault a woman who'd offered him a ride. She fought back and escaped. Weeks later, he attacked 2 more women. This time, the court ordered mandatory therapy instead of prison. He was released. Almost immediately, he struck again. He stabbed another woman while trying to abduct her. She survived. This time, Rodriguez got 23 years in prison. But in May 2003, after 2 decades inside, he walked out. 7 months later, Dru Sjodin vanished. The man from Crookston. After prison, Rodriguez moved to Crookston, Minnesota, the same Crookston where Dru's phone had last pinged. The same Crookston where search teams found Dru's black shoe near the riverbank. Detectives felt the circle tightening. But suspicion isn't enough. They needed evidence fast. The first interrogation. On the 4th day after Dru disappeared, police knocked on Rodriguez's door. He didn't run. He didn't seem surprised. Inside the station, he admitted being at the mall. "I was there to watch a movie," he said. Detectives asked which one. He named a specific title. They checked. Not only wasn't that movie playing at the mall, it wasn't playing anywhere in Grand Forks that day. A lie. And that lie opened the door. A search that changed everything. Police asked to search his car. Surprisingly, Rodriguez said yes. Inside, they found a receipt showing he bought a pocket knife. The actual knife, hidden inside a bottle of cleaning solution. A woman's shoe. And another knife, untouched by chemicals. The sheath found by Dru's car, it matched the knife Rodriguez bought. Perfectly. DNA, the silent witness. Forensics swabbed the knives, the car, everything. They found wiped blood stains in the car. They matched them to DNA from Dru's toothbrush. It was her. On the second knife, they found more blood. Again, Dru. The case that began with a missing person now had a suspect, a weapon, and DNA. Balanced scale, building the case. By December 10th, 2003, less than 3 weeks after Dru vanished, police arrested Alfonso Rodriguez Jr. Charges: kidnapping, suspected murder. But something haunted investigators. They still hadn't found Dru. They had a mountain of circumstantial evidence, but no body. They kept asking Rodriguez to tell them where she was. He refused. Not a word. Not a hint. The winter search. Winter in North Dakota and Minnesota isn't cold. It's brutal. Snow buries everything. Temperatures plunge far below freezing. Still, search teams kept going. Volunteers, police, students. They trudged through drifts. They peered under frozen riverbanks. For weeks, nothing. And as weeks turned to months, hope slowly turned to dread. Spring brings answers. By March 2004, nearly 4 months after Dru disappeared, prosecutors moved ahead. They believed they had enough to convict. Rodriguez pleaded not guilty. But the evidence, the knife, the DNA, the shoe, painted its own story. All that was missing was Dru. Then, as the snow melted in April, the searchers returned to the Red Lake River near Crookston. A heartbreaking discovery. April 17, 2004, searchers spotted something in the water. It was Dru. The river had kept her hidden all winter. Now it gave her back. Medical examiners found bruises, knife wounds, signs of sexual assault, possible strangulation. They couldn't say exactly how she died. It might have been the cold, too. What they did know, she likely died within 3 hours of being taken. The federal case. Because Dru had been taken across state lines, kidnapped in North Dakota, murdered in Minnesota, the case became federal. This changed everything. It meant Rodriguez could face the death penalty, even though neither state allowed it. For Dru's family, it felt like the only just outcome. For many others, it sparked debate. But before any sentence, there had to be a trial. If you're watching, don't stop here. The next chapter will show the courtroom battle and why this case changed federal law forever. Like, subscribe and stay with us. The fight for justice was only beginning. The suspect sat silent. The family sat in grief, and the entire nation watched. A federal trial unlike any other. The case of Dru Sjodin didn't stay local. Because she'd been kidnapped in North Dakota and murdered in Minnesota, it became federal. That meant prosecutors could seek something rare, the death penalty. Neither North Dakota nor Minnesota had used it in decades. Minnesota hadn't executed anyone since 1906. North Dakota? Even longer. Now, Alfonso Rodriguez Jr. became the first in a century to face that possibility. Summer 2006, the courtroom drama begins. Rodriguez pleaded not guilty. He barely spoke. His lawyers painted him as a sick man, born into poverty, abused as a child, suffering health problems. But the prosecution's case was cold and clear. Dru's blood was in his car. Her shoe was found where he lived. The knife matched the sheath by her car. And his story about going to see a movie had collapsed under fact-checking. The evidence that spoke louder than words. Prosecutors showed the jury. The knives. The cleaning solution he tried to use to hide the blood. The surveillance footage showing Rodriguez lurking around the mall. Cell tower data proving Dru's last call pinged near Crookston, where Rodriguez lived. They didn't have to prove exactly how Dru died. They only had to show Rodriguez took her, and she never came back. The family's agony. Dru's parents, Linda Walker and Alan Sjodin, sat every day in court. They heard testimony no parent should hear. How Dru was likely raped. How she was stabbed. How she might have died in the freezing cold alone. They listened. They cried. But they stayed for her. Because this wasn't just about punishing Rodriguez. It was about making sure no other family ever suffered the way they did. A verdict that shook 2 states. February 8th, 2007. The jury deliberated. Then, guilty, sentenced to death. The first federal death penalty case in North Dakota in over a century. And the first ever in modern Minnesota history. Some cheered. Others debated the ethics. But for Dru's family, it felt like justice, turning grief into action. But Linda Walker and Alan Sjodin didn't stop at the verdict. They fought for a law to track violent criminals. Too many times, dangerous men slipped through cracks, unknown to neighbors, to employers, to campuses. They campaigned, spoke to Congress, met with lawmakers. In July 2006, President Bush signed the Dru Sjodin National Sex Offender Public Website into law. For the first time, anyone in America could search and see where sex offenders lived. A victory born of heartbreak. Years on death row. Rodriguez sat on death row. Silent. Waiting. Dru's family tried to move forward. They created a scholarship in her name. They built a memorial garden. At the University of North Dakota, plans formed to build a second memorial. But the wound never closed. Because justice in America can stretch for decades. Appeals and doubts. In 2011, Rodriguez's lawyers filed an appeal. They said he had developmental disabilities. They said his original lawyers failed to present crucial evidence about his troubled childhood. At first, courts rejected it. But in 2021, nearly 18 years after Dru vanished, a judge ruled differently. The case reopens. The judge agreed Rodriguez's defense team hadn't fully presented his mental health history. He noted the original medical examiner may have exaggerated the brutality to the jury. Result? Rodriguez's death sentence was overturned. A new sentencing trial was ordered. A confession that changed little. Back in 2013, while sitting on death row, Rodriguez confessed in an interview, "I did it." But the new legal fight wasn't about guilt. It was about whether he should die for it. A new sentence. In March 2023, 2 decades after Dru's murder, Rodriguez was sentenced again. Life in prison without parole. No chance of ever walking free. No more appeals for execution. Dru's family had mixed feelings. The death penalty would never bring Dru back. But they wanted the strongest punishment. Now, at least, they knew Rodriguez would never hurt anyone again. A legacy stronger than the crime. Through their pain, Dru's family changed laws. They forced a nation to pay attention to who lives next door. They turned their daughter's memory into action that saves lives. On campus, students still see her name on the scholarship fund. In her hometown, flowers still bloom in the garden built for Dru. What do you think watching this? Should Rodriguez have faced execution? Or was life in prison the right answer? Tell us in the comments. And if you want more true crime stories that go deeper, darker, and beyond the headlines, subscribe and stay tuned. One crime, one victim, but the echoes changed an entire country. Beyond the courtroom, the trial ended, the cameras left, but the impact of Dru Sjodin's case kept growing. Because people weren't just angry about what happened, they were furious about why it was allowed to happen. A man with a violent past, multiple attacks, a failed rehab program, and still, somehow, he walked free. People wanted answers, and they demanded change, the law born from tragedy. Dru's family didn't just grieve. They fought, with lawmakers, with activists, with other victims' families. They asked a simple question. Why can't the public know who lives next door? And in 2006, the answer arrived. The Dru Sjodin National Sex Offender Public Website. One click, one search, and families could see every registered sex offender in their area. It didn't bring Dru back, but it saved others. The chilling reality. When the database launched, many were shocked. Dangerous offenders living blocks away, near schools, near parks, unknown to most neighbors. The website didn't solve everything, but it pulled back the curtain. And it forced cities and states to tighten how they tracked and monitored offenders, the system that failed. Behind every headline is a system, and that system had failed Dru. Rodriguez's story was tragic in its own way. Born into poverty, abused as a child, severe medical problems that isolated him. At 21, he crossed a line from troubled to dangerous, and then again and again, rehabilitation or risk. After his first convictions, courts sent Rodriguez to therapy instead of prison. Some believed he could be saved. Even Rodriguez's own family doubted it. But experts disagreed. They said he was too dangerous. In the end, the risk outweighed hope. The cost? Dru's life. Should he have been released? That question haunted lawmakers. Reporters asked it over and over. Rodriguez's supervising doctor spoke out after the trial. I told them, don't let him go. He isn't ready. But the system released him anyway. A gap between caution and law. A gap Dru fell through. The death penalty debate reignites. Rodriguez's sentence sparked a new debate. Does execution bring justice? Some felt only death matched the horror of Dru's fate. Others warned it wouldn't stop future crimes. Some pointed to his mental health, that executing him felt wrong. The debate reached the highest levels. Governors, senators, even the president. But no matter the side, the case forced America to look at how it handles repeat offenders. Dru's legacy lives on. Her name lives on the National Registry, on a scholarship at the University of North Dakota, in a memorial garden where flowers bloom every spring. Students read her story. Parents teach her name to remind kids to stay alert. Dru became more than a victim. She became a symbol of why the system can't afford to look away. A family that wouldn't stop. Even after Rodriguez was sentenced, Dru's family kept going. They spoke at schools. They raised awareness about campus safety. They told Dru's story, not to scare, but to protect. Because they knew. Laws fade, headlines fade, but stories stay. And telling Dru's story could save someone else. A second trial, a second heartbreak. In 2021, nearly 18 years later, a judge overturned Rodriguez's death sentence. Why? The defense hadn't fully presented evidence of Rodriguez's developmental problems. The medical examiner's testimony may have exaggerated the brutality. For Dru's family, it felt like the past reopened. Old wounds, fresh pain, a new sentence, life without parole. In March 2023, Rodriguez was resentenced. Life in prison, no parole. For Dru's family, it wasn't what they wanted, but it meant he would never walk free. Rodriguez had already confessed years earlier. The debate wasn't over guilt, it was over punishment. The questions left behind. The case answered one question: who killed Dru Sjodin? But it left bigger ones. How many other predators walk free? Can violent offenders truly change? And why does the system sometimes gamble with lives? No single trial can answer those. A voice that still matters. Dru was only 22. She loved art. She cared about others. She had plans to see Australia. That life ended in minutes, but her story keeps talking. In classrooms, in law books, in every parent's warning. Your voice matters too. You watch this story. Now what do you think? Should Rodriguez have been executed? Should repeat violent offenders ever walk free? How do we balance rehabilitation and public safety? Write your thoughts in the comments. Your words keep Dru's story alive. And if you want more true crime that digs deeper, that asks the questions most channels won't, subscribe and stay with us. Because this case wasn't just about justice. It was about what happens when the system looks away, and what it takes, sadly, to make it look back. Before she was a headline, before she was a victim, Dru Sjodin was simply Dru. And this is who she really was. The girl behind the smile. Dru Katrina Sjodin was born on September 26, 1981, in Minnesota. She grew up in Pequot Lakes, a small town where everyone seemed to know her name. Friends remember her laugh first. It was loud, real, contagious, the kind that could break tension in a room. She wasn't just pretty, she was alive. The kind of person who made others feel seen. Art and heart. Dru loved art. She'd fill sketchbooks with designs, flowers, fashion, small notes to herself. But her creativity didn't stop there. She volunteered. She raised money for charities. She organized events to help kids in need. She didn't just draw a kinder world. She tried to build it. Energy that never stopped. Basketball, volleyball, golf. Dru didn't choose between them. She played them all. In high school, she balanced sports, friendships, and grades. And somehow, she still had time to volunteer. Even at the end of long practice days, she'd stay late to help decorate the gym for events. A prom queen who stayed humble. She was voted prom queen, not because she chased popularity, but because everyone liked her, from the athletes to the shy kids. She had a gift, making people feel important, not in grand gestures, in small moments, remembering birthdays, checking in, making sure no one felt left out. Dreams bigger than home. After high school, Dru left for the University of North Dakota. It was 3 hours from home. She majored in fine arts. Her friends say she hoped to design her own clothing line one day. Something original, something real. She worked 2 part-time jobs to pay her way. At a clothing store in the mall, as a waitress at a local club, all while staying active in campus life and charity work. Adventure ahead. In her last months, Dru was planning something huge, a trip to Australia through a university program. She talked about it constantly, the beaches, the art museums, the food. It was her first real adventure abroad, a chance to see the world beyond Minnesota and North Dakota. She never got there. But for a while, that trip was her dream on the horizon. Love and hope. Dru had a boyfriend, Chris. They'd been together for a while, and things were getting serious. They talked about a future, moving in, finishing college, seeing where life took them. That night in November 2003, Dru called him from a parking lot. A small, normal thing couples do. She never got a call back. The day that changed everything. November 22nd, 2003. Just another Saturday. She finished her shift at the clothing store. She stopped at another shop and bought a new purse. Then she called Chris as she walked to her car. It should have ended there. A call, a drive home, another night. Instead, her last words were, "Oh my God, okay." Then silence. Why remembering Dru matters? True crime often focuses on killers, on evidence, on horror. But Dru's story is about something else. A young woman with plans, a daughter who called her mom almost every day, a friend who never forgot your birthday, a student balancing work and study, still finding time to help others. The life stolen, the light that stayed. Dru never finished college, never opened that clothing line, never got to Australia. But her family refused to let her memory fade into a cold statistic. They built a scholarship in her name so other young women could chase their dreams. A memorial garden in Pequot Lakes, a quiet place for reflection. Plans for a campus memorial so future students would know Dru's name and why she mattered. How her hometown remembers her. Pequot Lakes is small, but Dru's memory feels everywhere. Photos in yearbooks, a plaque near the school gym, her name spoken at graduation ceremonies. Each year, people gather to remember not just how she died, but how she lived. Why stories like Dru's change us. For her family, telling Dru's story is painful, but necessary. It warns others to stay aware, to trust instincts, to demand better protection for vulnerable people. It reminds us that behind every headline is a human life, dreams, family, love, legacy over tragedy. Dru didn't choose what happened to her, but what came after laws, awareness, change is part of her legacy. Because of her, offenders can't hide as easily. Parents know to ask hard questions. Colleges invest more in campus safety. When you say her name, her mother once said, you keep her alive. So we keep saying it. Dru Sjodin. Now it's your turn. You've watched her story. What part of Dru's life touched you most? What can each of us do to make sure stories like hers don't repeat? Share in the comments. Your words keep her light alive. And if you want to keep exploring stories that remember victims first, subscribe and join us. One crime, one victim, but the ripples still move through every courtroom, every family, every law book. What justice really meant. When Alfonso Rodriguez was sentenced, some called it justice. Others called it too late. Dru's family didn't get to see her graduate, didn't get to meet the woman she might have become. A guilty verdict couldn't fill that space at the dinner table. But it sent a message. The system finally saw her. The law speaks Dru's name. The Dru Sjodin National Sex Offender Public Website wasn't just another registry. It changed how America talks about risk. Before Dru, databases existed, but they were scattered, local, inconsistent. After Dru, there was one nationwide resource. Anyone could type in a name, a street, a zip code, and know. It didn't erase fear, but it turned secrecy into sunlight. What states learned? Dru's case forced every state to look inward. How they tracked offenders after prison. How they shared that data across borders. How parole boards weigh rehabilitation against danger. And many changed. Some added GPS monitoring. Others strengthened community notifications. A few revised who could be released at all. Because Dru showed what a single oversight could cost, what wasn't fixed. But laws aren't magic. The registry shows known offenders. It can't warn about first-time predators. And it can't force neighbors to act. Some states still underfund enforcement. Some parole boards still roll the dice. The system learned, but it didn't become perfect. Dru's family keeps fighting. They could have stepped back after the verdict. Instead, Dru's family chose activism. They spoke on campuses about staying aware. They sat with lawmakers pushing for tighter reforms. They built a scholarship so another young woman could do what Dru couldn't. Finish college. Every speech, every signature, every planted flower, all said the same thing. Dru was here, and she still matters. How a small town remembers. Pequot Lakes is still quiet. The seasons still change. But Dru's name is part of its rhythm. In spring, lilacs bloom in the memorial garden. In winter, candles burn at vigils. At graduation, seniors hear her story. Not as a warning, but as a reminder of kindness, dreams, and how quickly life can turn. Dove for victims who came after. Because Dru's story wasn't just about her. Her case taught police to act faster when young women go silent. Taught universities to invest more in campus safety. Taught families everywhere to listen when instinct whispers. Something feels wrong. The debate that never ended. Rodriguez's original death sentence was overturned. Some saw relief. Others saw betrayal. In 2023, he was re-sentenced to life in prison without parole. He will die behind bars. But the debate over death penalty versus life goes on. Dru's name appears in that debate even now. In legal textbooks, podcasts, classrooms, the woman we almost met. We talk about Dru's death because it changed laws. But what about Dru's life? A 22-year-old artist who loved fashion. A friend who never forgot birthdays. A daughter planning a trip to Australia. That's who her family remembers at every holiday. Not the crime scene. Not the verdict. Just Dru. What we can learn. It's easy to get lost in details. DNA tests, CCTV footage, courtroom transcripts. But Dru's story teaches something simpler. Trust your instincts. Protect each other. Demand systems that act before tragedy, not after. Globe showing Europe, Africa, the world Dru never saw. She never boarded that flight to Australia. Never designed that clothing line. Never walked across the graduation stage. But her story still travels. In classrooms, on crime documentaries, in late-night conversations between parents and daughters. A name that still matters. The registry still exists. The scholarship still funds young women's dreams. The memorial garden still blooms every spring. All because Dru's family and a nation refuse to forget. Your voice keeps her story alive. You've watched until now. But the real question is, what will you do? Should repeat violent offenders ever walk free? How can we balance hope for change with the need to protect? Should the death penalty exist? Or is life without parole enough? Tell us in the comments. Because true crime isn't just about past crimes, it's about what we do next. Before you go, if Dru's story moved you, if you believe stories like hers should never be forgotten, hit subscribe. Share this video. Together, we keep her memory alive. Together, we make sure the system keeps watching. Together, we prove that one name, one life really can change the law. Dru Sjodin. Remember her.